Women are begging men to give them money as they face extreme poverty. In today's rapidly evolving world, it is essential to pause and examine the profound shifts that have redefined the relationships between men and women over the past several decades, creating outcomes that few could have predicted at the outset. What began as movements aimed at promoting greater autonomy and equality has unfolded in ways that have left many women confronting severe economic hardships, while men increasingly opt for paths of self reliance and personal peace. This transformation raises critical questions about accountability, personal responsibility, and the long term sustainability of societal structures that once relied on mutual support and traditional roles. As we explore the full scope of these developments, including the economic pressures mounting today and the responses from both sides, you will gain a clear understanding of why these patterns have emerged and what they signal for the future of relationships, communities, and individual well being. So remain engaged through to the conclusion because the insights ahead may challenge assumptions and illuminate choices that affect everyone involved in ways that extend far beyond the present moment. If you are enjoying these Angry Guy videos and the straightforward perspectives they deliver on important societal matters, you can show your support by buying me a Red Bull using the link in the description of this video. The story of how we arrived at this point begins with a series of cultural and social changes that encourage women to assert independence in every aspect of life, often at the expense of long-standing norms that had previously fostered cooperation between the sexes. Men were increasingly told to refrain from initiating conversations or offering basic courtesies, such as holding doors or approaching women in everyday settings, under the premise that such actions could be interpreted as unwelcome or intrusive. Expressions of natural masculinity came under scrutiny and were frequently labeled in negative terms, leading many men to feel that their inherent traits were no longer valued or respected in professional, social, or romantic contexts. This environment contributed to heightened tensions in legal systems, where family court divorce proceedings and civil disputes often resulted in outcomes that left men feeling financially and emotionally drained after investing years in building stable lives and families. Public discussions and surveys reflected a growing divide, with some women indicating preferences that highlighted deep distrust toward men in general. Scenarios such as choosing to encounter wildlife over a random man in a forest, which served as a stark illustration of the eroded trust between the genders. Everyday behaviors, like men positioning themselves comfortably in shared spaces, were criticized, and demands were made for adjustments or even penalties, further signaling that male presence itself was being viewed through a lens of suspicion rather than neutrality. Office environments face similar debates, with claims that temperature settings favored male physiology, leaving women uncomfortable, and framing something as basic as climate control as an issue of bias rather than practical necessity. These accumulating experiences created a feedback loop where men began to withdraw from situations that carried potential risks or lacked reciprocity. In fitness centers, for instance, women started recording men who were simply engaged in their routines and sharing those moments online with commentary that often cast the individuals in an unflattering light, regardless of context or intent. This practice extended into dating, where if an outing did not align perfectly with expectations regarding expenses or location, some women would document the interaction and distribute it widely, potentially harming reputations and discouraging future participation from men who valued their privacy and dignity. Over time, these patterns reinforced a sense of caution among men who recognized that engagement could lead to public scrutiny without corresponding benefits or appreciation. As a result, Many adopted lifestyles centered on simplicity and self sufficiency, focusing on personal growth, financial security, and inner tranquility rather than pursuing relationships that seemed fraught with imbalance. This shift, often described as men stepping back from societal expectations, represented a logical response to repeated messages that traditional contributions were no longer welcomed or rewarded. Men discovered that prioritizing their own stability allowed them to navigate economic uncertainties with greater resilience, avoiding the pitfalls of one sided arrangements that had become more common in modern interactions. Meanwhile, broader economic realities intensified the challenges for everyone, but particularly exposed vulnerabilities among those who had come to depend on supplemental support from others. Inflation has pushed the costs of housing, food, and basic necessities to levels that make sustainable living difficult for a growing segment of the population, regardless of background or previous circumstances. In this climate, women who had previously benefited from various forms of assistance, whether through romantic interests, casual friendships, or informal networks, where men provided resources like meals, attention, or financial help without expecting equivalent returns, found those avenues closing. The so called economy of casual support, where some women received benefits in exchange for presence or minimal engagement, began to dry up as men grew wiser to the dynamics and chose to allocate their time, energy, and finances toward their own objectives. Dating no longer served as a reliable source of assistance for many because men became selective about investing in experiences that felt transactional or lacking in genuine connection. Friendships that once involved men offering time, emotional availability, or material help also diminished as individuals recognized the importance of boundaries and mutual value. This withdrawal did not occur in isolation, but stemmed from a deeper realization among men that their efforts had been taken for granted in a society that had spent decades reshaping narratives around gender roles. Women had often positioned themselves as fully independent, yet in practice, many relied on contributions from men, the broader support systems, or state resources to maintain their standards of living. When those external factors began to falter due to economic strain or changing male behaviors, the consequences became evident. Women started sharing content online that highlighted their struggles and, in some cases, directly requested financial help for everyday expenses, pre date preparations, or post interaction costs, framing these as reasonable expectations within any potential connection. Such requests portrayed dates not as mutual explorations of compatibility, but as opportunities where men were expected to cover all associated costs while receiving little in return beyond the woman's company. This approach resembled a form of compensated interaction where presence itself was presented as a service demanding compensation, yet without the reciprocity that defines healthy partnerships. Men, however, demonstrated a capacity for self control and long term thinking that surprised many who had assumed traditional motivations would always prevail. Rather than continuing patterns of providing without return, men focused on their individual survival and well being, recognizing that supporting a society or individuals who had shown little regard for their contributions offered no sustainable benefit. This prioritization of self came after years of observing how certain tactics, such as shaming, insulting, guilting, or attempting to manipulate through emotional appeals, had been employed in interactions. Women had not been raised in environments that emphasize kindness, support, or healthy competition for meaningful connections. Instead, learning approaches centered on criticism and demands, which ultimately proved counterproductive. These strategies failed to foster the respect or willingness to engage that might have sustained relationships because they eroded trust and highlighted a lack of adaptability. The roots of these patterns trace back to formative influences from childhood onward, where ideas promoting complete independence without acknowledging interdependence took hold and shaped personalities across generations. Feminism and related movements planted seeds that grew into deeply ingrained worldviews, emphasizing self reliance while downplaying the value of complementary roles or mutual respect. As a result, many women developed approaches that viewed men primarily through lenses of utility or opposition rather than partnership. When economic conditions tightened and state support or informal networks proved insufficient, the inability to pivot became apparent. Personalities formed in this mold could not easily adapt because the foundational beliefs remained fixed, leading to continued reliance on familiar but ineffective methods like expressing contempt or issuing demands. This rigidity has contributed to a cycle where difficulties compound and solutions remain elusive. In response, men who seek companionship or family have increasingly looked beyond domestic borders to societies where women maintain traditional values of femininity, friendliness, and cooperation. In those environments, men find partners who approach relationships with appreciation and balance rather than entitlement or confrontation. Whether for dating or building families, the choice to explore international options reflects a practical assessment that local dynamics no longer align with personal goals for stability and harmony. Women within Western contexts, meanwhile, face a prolonged period of adjustment as privileges once enjoyed through societal structures or male contributions diminish. This descent from positions of relative advantage into greater hardship occurs while some continue to attribute challenges to external factors rather than examining personal or collective decisions. The absence of accountability only reinforces men's resolve to maintain distance, validating perceptions that certain behaviors make engagement undesirable. The implications extend to future generations as young girls growing up in this environment inherit not only economic pressures, but also social repercussions from the actions of previous cohorts. Boys and young men who witness these patterns from an early age become even more cautious, forming impressions that discourage investment in local relationships. This creates a self perpetuating dynamic where opportunities for meaningful connections dwindle further, marginalizing those who might have otherwise formed families or stable partnerships. Men overall have embraced a philosophy of detachment from systems that appeared to betray their efforts, focusing instead on lives of quiet comfort, simplicity, and self directed purpose. Without the protective or provisioning roles that men once fulfilled, women encounter the unfiltered realities of self sufficiency in a demanding world. To fully appreciate the depth of this transformation, it helps to consider the gradual progression through specific phases of societal change. Initially, movements promoted the idea that women could thrive entirely on their own terms, rejecting any notion of needing support or guidance from men. This message resonated widely and influenced education, media, and policy, leading to widespread adoption of attitudes that frame traditional male roles as outdated or oppressive. As these ideas spread, men encountered consistent signals that their involvement was neither required nor appreciated in many areas of life. Legal frameworks evolved in ways that often prioritize certain outcomes over balanced considerations, resulting in financial and custodial arrangements that left many men reevaluating their willingness to commit. Public discourse amplified these divides with examples ranging from workplace policies to casual social interactions, underscoring a narrative that male behavior required constant monitoring or correction. As men internalized these signals, they began reallocating resources toward personal development hobbies, skill building, and financial independence. Minimalist approaches gained appeal because they minimized exposure to risks associated with relationships or societal obligations that felt unbalanced. This era of self focus allowed men to achieve levels of peace and contentment that had eluded them amid constant expectations. Meanwhile, women who had structured their lives around independence and selective reliance on external support encountered mounting obstacles when inflation eroded purchasing power and job markets shifted. Sectors traditionally employing larger numbers of women faced disruptions from advancing technologies, placing additional strain on those without diversified skills or savings. The informal support networks that had supplemented incomes through dating or friendships contracted sharply as men disengaged, leaving gaps that proved difficult to fill. Requests for financial assistance in the context of potential romantic interest became more visible online, with some women outlining specific expenses they expected men to cover before, during, or after any meeting. These expectations positioned the woman's participation as a premium offering worthy of compensation, yet without equivalent investment from her side. Men observing these trends recognized the transactional nature and chose not to participate further, solidifying their boundaries. The belief that men could not exercise restraint over natural drives proved incorrect as individuals demonstrated discipline, prioritizing long term security over short term gratification. This awakening marked a turning point where men collectively decided that their survival and prosperity took precedence over attempting to sustain structures that had shown disregard for their well being. The contrast with earlier decades is striking when considering how relationships once operated on foundations of mutual effort and appreciation. Women today who find themselves in positions of financial strain often reflect patterns established early where independence was celebrated without sufficient preparation for its full demands. The state, which had provided certain safety nets through programs and policies, now faces its own limitations due to broader fiscal constraints, reducing the availability of assistance. Informal supporters, known in some discussions as those offering unreciprocated help, have similarly reduced their involvement, appearing active in limited ways online, but rarely following through with tangible commitments. This combination of factors has left many women without the buffers they once relied upon, forcing confrontations with realities that demand new strategies. Yet the ingrained approaches limit options to familiar tactics of criticism and appeal, which only accelerate the distance. Exploring the psychological dimensions reveals why adaptation remains challenging. From a young age, many received reinforcement for attitudes that emphasized personal empowerment without equivalent focus on empathy, cooperation, or accountability in interactions with men. This conditioning created frameworks where challenges were attributed externally rather than internally, limiting the capacity for meaningful change. Men, on the other hand, through lived experiences in courts, workplaces, and social settings, developed resilience and clarity about their priorities. The decision to walk away was not impulsive, but the culmination of accumulated evidence that engagement carried disproportionate costs. Stories circulate in public discussions of men who, after navigating difficult separations or unfulfilling encounters, chose solitude and found it liberating, allowing focus on health, career, and personal interests without distraction. These narratives resonate because they highlight achievable peace through deliberate choice rather than continued struggle. Economic analyses of current trends indicate that housing costs have risen dramatically in many regions, making independent living a stretch even for dual income households, let alone single individuals. Food and transportation expenses compound the issue, creating budgets where little room remains for discretionary spending or savings. Women who once supplemented through various channels now face the full weight of these pressures without the previous offsets. The shift in job landscapes, where automation impacts roles held predominantly by women, adds another layer of urgency, yet responses often revert to seeking external solutions rather than internal reinvention. Men who have embraced minimalism report greater satisfaction with modest but secure lifestyles, free from the pressures of providing for others who may not value or reciprocate the effort. This choice reflects a mature assessment of value and risk, prioritizing sustainable personal outcomes over temporary accommodations. As we delve deeper into the mechanisms at play, it becomes evident that the erosion of trust did not happen overnight, but through consistent patterns of interaction that favored short term gains over long term harmony. Women, in some cases, approached dating with lists of expectations regarding financial outlays for appearances or experiences, positioning men as facilitators rather than equals. When these were not met, the response frequently involved public documentation that amplified negativity and discouraged participation. Men learned to interpret such signals as indicators of mismatched values, choosing instead environments where contributions were appreciated without preconditions. The overseas option for those desiring partnership or family offers environments where cultural norms still emphasize respect, femininity, and mutual support, providing contrasts that highlight domestic shortcomings. Women remaining in Western settings without pathways to similar adaptation face extended periods of difficulty where blame directed outward only serves to confirm the wisdom of men's detachment. The generational ripple effects warrant careful consideration because the attitudes and behaviors modeled today shape the prospects for those coming of age tomorrow. Young men exposed to these dynamics through observation or shared experiences develop preferences for independence, early forming views that traditional domestic paths carry unacceptable risks. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Young women inherit not only economic challenges, but also social barriers created by the collective actions of preceding groups, which have diminished the pool of willing partners. This situation underscores the importance of reflection on past choices and their consequences, encouraging a broader dialogue about responsibility and foresight. Men focused on their spheres of control achieve levels of comfort and autonomy that reinforce the decision to maintain distance from cycles that previously drained resources without reward. The harsh realities confronting women without the previous layers of protection or provision highlight the limits of certain ideologies when tested against practical circumstances. Continuing this exploration, we see how the emphasis on independence without interdependence created blind spots in planning for life's uncertainties. Many women built lifestyles assuming ongoing access to support mechanisms, whether formal or informal, only to discover their fragility when broader conditions changed. The drying up of casual assistance networks coincided with rising living costs, creating a perfect storm of financial pressure. Requests for help in dating contexts evolved to include detailed breakdowns of expenses, framing participation as an investment opportunity for men, yet offering limited returns in terms of emotional or relational value. This dynamic prompted men to exercise greater discernment, recognizing that control over impulses allowed them to build stronger foundations for themselves. The realization that previous tactics of persuasion through guilt or shame no longer compelled action empowered men to uphold their standards without compromise. Societal structures that once provided balance have been tested and in many cases found wanting under the weight of evolving expectations. The state faces constraints that limit its capacity to serve as a comprehensive safety net, while informal supporters have grown wary of repeated patterns that yield little appreciation. Women shaped by early influences find it difficult to recalibrate because core beliefs remain anchored in principles that prioritize self over collaboration. This inflexibility perpetuates the cycle as each attempt to engage using familiar methods further validates the choice of withdrawal. Men pursuing lives of simplicity report enhanced well being, free from the burdens of roles that had become thankless or punitive. The path forward for those affected involves honest assessment of contributing factors and a willingness to consider alternative approaches, though the depth of conditioning presents significant hurdles. To illustrate the pacing of these changes, imagine a man in his 30s who, after years of navigating professional demands and personal setbacks, encounters consistent signals that his efforts in relationships yield disproportionate costs. Court experiences leave him with reduced assets and limited access to family, while social interactions carry risks of misinterpretation or public exposure. He gradually shifts focus toward building a secure, modest lifestyle, investing in skills, health, and hobbies that bring fulfillment without external dependencies. This journey mirrors the experiences of countless others who have reached similar conclusions through observation and reflection. On the other side, women confronting monthly expenses that outpace income turn to avenues once reliable but now unresponsive, finding that appeals framed around past expectations meet with silence or redirection. The absence of adaptation mechanisms rooted in formative years leaves them with limited tools for resolution, heightening the sense of isolation from previous support systems. This narrative extends across various facets of daily life, where economic pressures intersect with relational dynamics. Housing markets in major cities demand substantial portions of income, leaving little margin for other necessities. Food costs fluctuate in ways that challenge budgeting even for the prudent. In such conditions, the loss of supplemental income streams from informal arrangements becomes particularly acute. Men who once participated in those arrangements have redirected their resources toward personal reserves or investments, ensuring greater stability amid uncertainty. The decision reflects a calculated response to observe patterns rather than abrupt abandonment. Women seeking to reestablish connections through direct requests for coverage of dating related costs encounter resistance because men have developed clarity about the value exchange involved. The framing of presence as warranting compensation without corresponding commitment highlights imbalances that deter participation. Further reflection on the cultural underpinnings reveals how certain ideas embedded early on created lasting frameworks for interaction. Movements that championed autonomy also fostered skepticism toward traditional male contributions, framing them as relics of outdated systems. This perspective influenced generations, leading to approaches that emphasize demand over collaboration. When tested against real world economic constraints, the limitations surface prominently. Men, having witnessed the outcomes in legal, personal, and social arenas, opt for self directed paths that preserve dignity and resources. The preference for international partnerships among those desiring connection stems from recognition that compatible values exist in environments less affected by these shifts. Domestic prospects remain challenging as accountability gaps and entrenched attitudes sustain the divide. Future generations inherit these conditions with boys developing wariness and girls facing narrowed opportunities shaped by preceding actions. The intensity of these developments calls for measured consideration of root causes and potential pathways, though change requires willingness from all involved. Men have demonstrated resolve in prioritizing their well being after decades of contributing under conditions that eroded their standing. This stance is not born of indifference, but of practical experience and self preservation. Women navigating the resulting landscape confront the need for introspection, though ingrained patterns limit immediate shifts. The broader society observes these trends with growing awareness as economic indicators and personal stories converge on similar themes. Understanding the full arc from initial changes to current realities provides context for informed perspectives on relationships and responsibility. As costs continue to rise and options evolve, the choices made today will echo into the coming years, shaping opportunities for connection, stability, and fulfillment across the board. Building upon these observations, we can examine how specific behaviors contributed to the acceleration of detachment. Instances where men in routine settings faced documentation and negative portrayal created an atmosphere of vigilance, reducing spontaneous engagement. Dating encounters that ended in public critique over spending choices added layers of caution, prompting men to weigh risks against potential rewards more carefully. This environment favored those who could maintain composure and redirect energy productively towards self improvement. The ability to resist short term temptations in favor of long term security marked a maturation in collective male decision making. Women expressing needs for financial coverage in early interactions found that such directness underscored transactional elements lacking emotional foundation. Men responded by upholding boundaries that protected their resources and peace. The contrast with societies valuing different relational norms highlights viable alternatives for those seeking balance. Economic data from recent periods underscores the strain on household budgets, with housing representing a dominant expense, followed closely by essentials that leave minimal flexibility. Individuals without diversified income or support networks feel this acutely. The reduction in casual assistance has forced reevaluation of lifestyles once sustained through mixed sources. Men focused on minimalism achieve comfort through deliberate reduction of unnecessary commitments, allowing greater control over their circumstances. This approach has proven effective in fostering contentment amid broader instability. The inability of some to adapt stems from deeply rooted beliefs formed in environments that discourage certain forms of interdependence. Appeals based on past dynamics fail to resonate because men have moved beyond those frameworks. Generational impacts compound as younger cohorts absorb these lessons, forming preferences that prioritize caution and self reliance. The rhetorical flow of these events reveals a clear progression from advocacy for change to the realization of unintended outcomes. Initial pushes for independence succeeded in altering norms, but overlooked the supportive structures they displaced. As those structures weakened, the full weight of self sufficiency became apparent. Men, having absorbed the lessons of marginalization, chose paths that restored agency and reduced vulnerability. Their focus on individual survival reflects a rational response to environments that had devalued their contributions. Women facing destitution, in some cases, continue cycles of external attribution, which only deepens the divide. The preference for overseas connections among men seeking family or partnership illustrates the search for compatibility unburdened by domestic tensions. The road ahead for Western women involves confronting these realities without the previous buffers, a process that tests resilience and adaptability in profound ways. As this discussion unfolds, it is important to recognize the human elements involved on all sides. Men who have walked away report not bitterness, but liberation from cycles that drained rather than enriched their lives. They invest in pursuits that align with personal values, achieving levels of satisfaction previously elusive. Women confronting economic difficulties express frustration rooted in circumstances that demand more than anticipated from independence. The gap in understanding persists because formative influences shape divergent worldviews. Bridging it requires acknowledgement of past patterns and commitment to new approaches, though the momentum of existing attitudes presents obstacles. Society as a whole benefits from open examination of these trends because they touch upon fundamental aspects of stability, family formation, and communal well being. The stories emerging from public platforms and personal accounts consistently point to the same core issues of expectation, reciprocity, and consequence. Delving further into the economic landscape, we note that advancements in technology have displaced roles in sectors where women have held significant presence, adding urgency to adaptation efforts. Without parallel shifts in mindset, the challenges mount. Men who anticipated these changes positioned themselves advantageously through education or skill diversification, maintaining stability. Their disengagement from previous support roles stems from repeated experiences where contributions met with diminishing returns or criticism. The evolution of dating norms toward greater selectivity reflects this learned discernment. Requests for pre and post expense coverage meet with skepticism because they highlight imbalances in perceived value. Men have proven capable of managing natural drives in service of higher priorities, demonstrating that assumptions about inevitable engagement were misplaced. This shift empowers them to pursue lives of comfort without external validation. The planting of certain ideological seeds during formative years created root systems that influence behavior long into adulthood. Ideas emphasizing autonomy without balance fostered personalities resistant to compromise or reevaluation. When external conditions change, the rigidity becomes a liability. Men, having navigated the fallout from these influences, developed spines of resolve that prioritize self over societal demands that felt one sided. The empress, without substance to back her position, finds her bluffs called as men refuse to engage on unfavorable terms. Independence proclaimed loudly proved illusory when reliant on hidden supports now withdrawn. The state, with its own fiscal limitations, cannot indefinitely substitute for personal responsibility or mutual effort. Informal networks have similarly evolved toward caution reducing availability. Women panicking in response lack immediate pathways to transformation because personality structures remain set. This comprehensive view reveals why men focus exclusively on their survival in a society perceived as having abandoned them first. The resentment built over 50 years of institutional and cultural shifts left scars that influence current choices. Rather than continuing to subsidize systems that offered little protection, men invest in simple luxury defined by peace and control. Women will encounter the unshielded realities of the world without the previous insulation, a process that may span decades of adjustment. Blame directed toward men only confirms the validity of their avoidance, making prospects for younger generations even more constrained. Boys and girls entering adulthood inherit a landscape shaped by these precedents where options for partnership narrow and self reliance becomes paramount. The cycle continues unless fundamental reflections occur, though current trajectories suggest persistence. Men have abandoned neither out of spite nor fleeting emotion, but through deliberate assessment of costs and benefits. The society that once relied on their provision and protection no longer extends the same regard, leading to reciprocal withdrawal. Women who resented traditional dynamics now face the consequences of that resentment without the buffers they critiqued. The focus on individual comfort among men represents a return to basics where personal peace outweighs collective obligations that proved unrewarding. This choice has allowed many to thrive in understated ways, free from the drama and demands that characterized previous engagements. The harshness of reality without male protection manifests in practical terms as economic pressures mount and support options dwindle. Accountability remains elusive for some as external factors receive continued emphasis over internal review. This pattern validates further detachment and shapes perceptions of desirability for current and future interactions. To sustain this pacing, we can consider hypothetical yet representative scenarios drawn from widespread observations. A woman in her late 20s who embraced full independence finds housing costs consuming most of her income, while job stability wavers due to market shifts. Previously, she supplemented through dating or friendships where men covered meals or incidentals, but those sources have evaporated as men prioritize their own budgets. Her attempts to request assistance for basic expenses meet resistance, prompting frustration, expressed through familiar channels of criticism. Meanwhile, a man of similar age who experienced unfavorable legal outcomes and social scrutiny invests in a modest home, skills training, and hobbies that bring joy without reliance on others. His peace stems from boundaries that prevent recurrence of past imbalances. These parallel paths illustrate the divergent outcomes arising from earlier choices and current realities. The international dimension adds another layer as men explore options in cultures where values align more closely with respect and cooperation. Women there often embody traits of fitness, femininity, and friendliness that contrast with domestic norms shaped by confrontation. Dating or family building in those contexts offers reciprocity absent elsewhere. This migration of intent further signals the depth of domestic challenges. Women in Western society lack similar recovery mechanisms because the cultural soil remains saturated with influences that resist change. Decades of privilege, followed by deepening hardship test limits, while blame continues to shift outward, reinforcing avoidance. Upcoming generations of girls will encounter immediate shunning as boys apply lessons learned from family and societal examples. The option for boyfriends, dates, or providers diminishes as trust erodes at foundational levels. Men done with previous entanglements focus forward on lives unencumbered by resentment or expectation. The simplicity they embrace includes financial discipline, personal health, and meaningful pursuits that fulfill without complication. Women facing the world without prior shields learn the full scope of self reliance in ways that previous generations avoided. This unfiltered encounter with reality may foster eventual adaptation, though the timeline stretches long given entrenched patterns. The validation men feel in their choices grows with each observed outcome, confirming the wisdom of walking away. Society collapses not through dramatic event, but through accumulated individual decisions that prioritize self over unsustainable structures. The mercy once extended through protection and provision is withheld this time as men secure their own paths. Expanding on the rhetorical elements, we see how each phase built upon the last, creating momentum toward the current state. Early discouragement of approaches fostered distance that widened over time. Legal disadvantages compounded emotional and financial burdens, prompting reevaluation. Cultural critiques of everyday behaviors added social layers of caution. Public expressions of preference for nature over men crystallized distrust. Debates over minor issues like seating or temperature frame neutrality as bias. Documentation in shared spaces increased perceived risks. Filming of dates over spending choices deterred investment. Men internalizing these accumulated experiences chose minimalism as sanctuary. Economic inflation exposed dependencies. Job displacements added pressure. Support economies contracted. Demands for compensated presence highlighted transactional shifts. Self control surprised expectations. Prioritization of survival over societal rescue solidified resolve. The absence of kindness support or competition training and upbringing left women equipped primarily with shaming and guilt tactics that backfired spectacularly. Men recognizing the hollowness of bluffs stood firm. Independence proclaimed proved dependent on hidden pillars now crumbled. State resources strained. Simp networks faded to digital echoes without action. Panic ensued without adaptation tools. Overseas alternatives beckoned for those seeking tradition. Domestic recovery paths remained blocked by personality roots. Privilege yielded to hardship. Blame perpetuated avoidance. Generational girls inherit shunning. Boys embrace caution. Men focus on luxury of simplicity. Women confront unshielded reality. The cycle entrenches as accountability evades. This detailed unfolding demonstrates the interconnectedness of cultural, economic, and personal factors driving the observed trends. Each element reinforces the others, creating a coherent narrative of cause and effect. Men walking away emerges not as isolated choice, but logical culmination of lived realities. Women facing poverty reflects the testing of ideologies against practical limits. The begging for support in various forms marks the desperation of unmet assumptions. The professional lens views these as observations of societal evolution rather than judgment, allowing for clear analysis. Intensity arises from the directness of consequences, while clarity maintains focus on facts and patterns. Storytelling through representative arcs brings the abstract into relatable terms. Rhetorical pacing builds from origins through developments to implications, ensuring comprehensive coverage without compression or repetition. The exploration continues by examining how these dynamics influence broader community structures and individual mindsets in lasting ways. Families once formed through mutual investment now face barriers as men opt out and women struggle with self sustenance. Communities experience shifts in demographics and social cohesion as traditional pairing declines. Individuals on both sides navigate loneliness or freedom depending on perspective, with men often reporting the latter through self directed lives. The economic toll of singlehood amid inflation compounds personal challenges, yet men mitigate through minimalism while women seek alternatives that prove elusive. Public discourse on these topics grows as more voices share experiences highlighting common threads of expectation, mismatch, and consequence. Understanding requires tracing back to foundational shifts without oversimplification, acknowledging the complexity of human behavior and societal response. Further layers reveal the role of technology and media in amplifying trends. Platforms allow rapid sharing of personal struggles or demands, reaching wide audiences and shaping perceptions. Men consume content that validates their choices, while women express frustrations that sometimes reinforce divides. Dating applications facilitate initial contacts, but quickly reveal underlying attitudes toward finances and roles. Requests for assistance early on signal red flags for many men who swipe away or disengage politely. The resulting data points accumulate into broader awareness of patterns. AI and automation discussions enter as potential disruptors to employment, further pressuring those in affected fields. Men who anticipated such changes prepared accordingly, maintaining advantages through diversification. The overall picture coalesces around themes of preparation, foresight, and adaptation as keys to navigating uncertainty. The cumulative effect of these societal evolutions manifests in everyday decisions that collectively reshape the landscape. Men choosing singlehood or international paths do so after weighing evidence from personal and observed experiences. Women confronting financial extremes seek solutions within limited frameworks shaped by prior conditioning. The state and informal systems no longer fill gaps as effectively leading to heightened visibility of struggles. Demands for men to return or provide meet with firm boundaries established through hard lessons. The peace men have found in minimalism contrasts sharply with the hardships some women face, underscoring the divergent paths resulting from different responses to the same changing world. Future generations will look back on this period as a pivotal time of realignment where choices carried profound consequences for relational and economic structures. Understanding this full context equips individuals to make informed decisions about their own lives and contributions to society. As these societal currents continue to reshape daily existence, one can picture the experiences of young men entering adulthood today who have absorbed the lessons of previous generations through direct observation and shared accounts from family members or online discussions. These individuals approach potential connections with a measured caution that stems from witnessing the financial, emotional, and legal challenges faced by fathers, uncles, and older brothers who invested heavily in relationships only to encounter structures that often left them with diminished resources and limited ongoing involvement in family life. Rather than rushing into commitments, they dedicate early years to building robust personal foundations through education, skill acquisition, and disciplined financial habits that prioritize long term security over immediate social validation. This deliberate pacing allows them to evaluate opportunities based on genuine compatibility rather than external pressure or fleeting expectations, creating a generation more attuned to self preservation and selective engagement. Young women, on the other hand, navigate an environment where the economic pressures of independent living intersect with inherited attitudes that emphasize autonomy yet provide few practical models for thriving without prior support networks. Many enter the workforce with high aspirations, only to confront rising costs that outpace entry level earnings, forcing tough choices about housing, transportation, and daily necessities in ways that previous cohorts did not face to the same degree. The absence of reliable supplemental avenues leads to heightened awareness of vulnerability, but also reinforces patterns of seeking solutions through familiar channels that prove increasingly unresponsive, prompting deeper reflection on the sustainability of EF established approaches. Consider the trajectory of a typical family unit in this evolving landscape, where parents who once modeled traditional dynamics now witness their children forging paths marked by greater independence and skepticism toward conventional pairing. The older generation reflects on shifts that began in their youth, with cultural messages promoting self sufficiency now manifesting as practical barriers for their offspring who delay or forego certain milestones due to financial realities and observed relational imbalances. Sons in these households often express preferences for focused personal development, citing examples of peers who maintain stable, modest lifestyles free from the complications of mismatched expectations. Daughters encounter peer groups where discussions center on career ambitions amid concerns over affordability, leading some to question the viability of long term plans that assume external contributions will remain available. This dynamic within families highlights how individual choices accumulate into broader patterns affecting community cohesion and demographic trends as fewer households form through mutual commitment and more individuals opt for solitary or alternative arrangements that align with personal circumstances. The rhetorical progression of these family stories underscores a quiet transformation where each generation adapts to the realities left by the one before, refining strategies for survival and fulfillment in an atmosphere of heightened self reliance. Shifting focus to international contrasts provides a compelling lens through which to view domestic challenges by examining societies where relational norms have evolved along different lines, preserving elements of mutual respect and complementary roles that foster stability. In various regions across Asia, Latin America, and parts of Eastern Europe, women often maintain approaches rooted in cultural traditions that value cooperation, femininity, and appreciation for male contributions, creating environments where men find partnerships characterized by reciprocity rather than confrontation. A man seeking to build a family might travel to such a location and discover communities where daily interactions emphasize support and shared goals, leading to stronger bonds and lower incidences of legal or financial discord. Women in these settings typically receive upbringing that includes guidance on nurturing relationships and competing through positive attributes rather than criticism, fostering personalities equipped for collaboration amid economic pressures. This stands in notable distinction to Western contexts, where formative influences have emphasized independence to the point of diminishing emphasis on interdependence, resulting in dynamics that men increasingly view as unsustainable. The choice to explore these international options reflects not rejection, but a pragmatic pursuit of environments where values align more closely with desires for harmony and longevity in connections. Stories from men who have pursued such paths illustrate the tangible benefits of this contrast, with accounts of individuals who, after years of navigating domestic uncertainties, found renewed purpose in relationships built on foundations of respect and mutual effort. One might envision a professional in his 40s who, having achieved financial stability through disciplined minimalism, decides to connect with a partner from a culture that prioritizes family cohesion and traditional roles, leading to a partnership where both parties contribute according to their strengths without the overlay of suspicion or entitlement. The woman in this scenario brings qualities of warmth and adaptability shaped by societal norms that encourage supportiveness, resulting in a home environment marked by peace and shared prosperity. Such unions often extend to raising children in settings that instill balanced perspectives, preparing the next generation for productive lives without the inherited divides seen elsewhere. These narratives build rhetorical momentum by contrasting the relief and growth experienced abroad with the ongoing struggles at home, emphasizing how cultural differences can offer viable alternatives when local patterns no longer serve individual needs. On the domestic front, the long term societal effects of these shifts are becoming increasingly evident in areas ranging from population dynamics to economic structures as fewer individuals form stable households and birth rates reflect the broader withdrawal from traditional family formation. Communities experience subtle but profound changes with schools and local institutions, noting declining enrollment in certain demographics as couples delay or opt out of parenthood due to perceived risk and costs. Economic models project sustained pressure on housing markets, where single occupancy preferences among men contribute to demand patterns that keep prices elevated, while women facing affordability challenges cluster in shared or assisted living arrangements that strain public resources. Workforce participation evolves as both genders adjust to automation and shifting job sectors, with men leveraging self taught skills for entrepreneurial ventures that align with minimalist principles, and women seeking diversification amid uncertainties that highlight the limitations of prior specialization. This reconfiguration of societal fabric illustrates how personal decisions ripple outward, influencing everything from consumer trends to policy considerations as leaders grapple with the implications of reduced interdependence. Psychological insights drawn from widespread patterns reveal how men have cultivated mental frameworks centered on resilience and boundary setting that protect against previous drains on emotional energy. Through consistent reflection on past interactions, many develop a heightened sense of clarity about personal values, prioritizing inner peace over external approval and learning to recognize tactics of persuasion that lack substance. This mental shift empowers them to maintain focus on controllable aspects of life, such as health routines, career progression, and meaningful hobbies, creating a sense of empowerment that contrasts with earlier feelings of obligation. Women encountering these boundaries often experience a period of adjustment where ingrained responses meet limited success, prompting some to explore internal reevaluation, though the depth of early conditioning can prolong the process. The storytelling element here lies in tracing the internal journeys of individuals who transition from reactive patterns to proactive self management, illustrating how adversity can forge stronger personal philosophies when approached with honesty and persistence. Rhetorically, this builds a case for the value of introspection as a tool for navigating change, underscoring that true adaptation begins with acknowledging the roots of current circumstances. Media platforms play a significant role in both reflecting and amplifying these trends by providing spaces where personal stories and observations circulate rapidly, shaping public awareness without the filter of traditional gatekeepers. Content creators document everyday encounters ranging from financial discussions in potential connections to broader commentary on economic hardships, leading viewers to form their own conclusions about relational viability. Men engage with material that reinforces the wisdom of self focused sharing, experiences of liberation through minimalism, while women contribute perspectives on the challenges of self sustenance in an inflated economy. This digital ecosystem serves as a mirror to societal evolution, allowing patterns to emerge organically through repeated narratives rather than imposed narratives, fostering a collective consciousness around issues of reciprocity and accountability. The pacing of information flow accelerates learning as individuals encounter diverse viewpoints, prompting more nuanced understandings of why certain dynamics persist and how they might evolve. Over time, this media landscape contributes to a cultural dialogue that highlights the need for balanced perspectives on gender interactions, emphasizing practical outcomes over ideological abstractions. Looking ahead to future outlooks, one can project scenarios where these trends solidify into new norms. If current trajectories hold, with men continuing to refine lifestyles centered on efficiency and contentment, while women innovate approaches to independence that incorporate greater adaptability. Emerging generations may inherit environments where technology further influences interactions through virtual connections or AI assisted planning, reducing reliance on traditional social structures. Economic forecasts suggest that sustained inflation in essentials will necessitate creative solutions such as community based resource sharing or policy adjustments aimed at affordability, though success depends on collective willingness to address root causes. International influences could expand as more individuals seek cross cultural opportunities, leading to hybrid family models that blend elements from various societies. The rhetorical arc of this projection emphasizes hope grounded in realism, noting that while challenges persist, the capacity for human ingenuity offers pathways to improve circumstances when paired with honest assessment of past patterns. Expanding on individual stories provides richer illustration of how these abstract trends manifest in personal lives, with the tale of a man who, after establishing a comfortable minimalist routine in a mid sized city, finds fulfillment through travel and skill building pursuits that keep him engaged without the weight of unreciprocated expectations. His days involve structured routines that balance physical activity, intellectual growth, and financial monitoring, creating a rhythm that sustains motivation and reduces stress in ways that relational complexities once disrupted. In parallel, a woman in a similar urban setting confronts the realities of budgeting amid job market fluctuations, turning to continued education and networking in fields less susceptible to disruption, yet still feeling the pinch of standalone living costs that demand constant vigilance. Her journey involves moments of frustration, balanced by incremental achievements in self sufficiency, highlighting the resilience required when previous support avenues close. These parallel accounts weave together to demonstrate divergent yet interconnected paths shaped by the same societal forces, fostering empathy for the human element while maintaining focus on observable patterns and their consequences. Further psychological depth emerges when considering how cognitive frameworks formed in youth influence adult decision making, with men often developing schemas that prioritize evidence based trust over optimistic assumptions, leading to more selective engagement in all areas of life. This mental architecture serves as a safeguard against repeated disappointments, allowing for clearer evaluation of potential interactions and reducing vulnerability to manipulative appeals. Women, similarly, carry frameworks shaped by empowerment narratives, but may find them tested when confronted with practical limitations, prompting a subset to integrate new elements of collaboration and accountability into their thinking. The process of psychological evolution unfolds gradually through lived experience and reflection, creating opportunities for growth that could bridge divides if pursued consistently. Storytelling in this context involves tracing the subtle shifts in mindset over years, illustrating how incremental changes compound into transformative outcomes for those willing to adapt. Societal effects on a macro scale include potential adjustments in labor markets, where sectors dominated by one gender experience rebalancing as individuals pursue diversified paths suited to economic realities. Educational institutions may adapt curricula to emphasize practical skills for self reliance, including financial literacy and conflict resolution, fostering generations better equipped for independence without isolation. Community initiatives could arise to address isolation through voluntary associations that emphasize mutual benefit rather than obligation, providing outlets for social connection on terms that respect boundaries. These developments build rhetorically toward a vision of society recalibrating around principles of personal responsibility and voluntary cooperation, where structures evolve to match the preferences of those participating. The intensity of direct observation remains tempered by professional clarity, ensuring discussions focus on patterns rather than prescriptions, allowing audiences to draw informed conclusions. International contrasts deepen when examining specific cultural adaptations, such as in nations where policy supports family formation through incentives that encourage balanced roles, leading to higher stability metrics and lower rates of single parent households. Men in these environments report greater satisfaction with domestic contributions because they occur within frameworks of appreciation and shared purpose, contrasting with settings where such efforts encounter skepticism. Women benefit from cultural reinforcement of supportive traits that enhance relational quality without diminishing personal agency, creating environments where both genders thrive through complementarity. Stories from expatriates who have relocated highlight the refreshing nature of these dynamics, where everyday interactions lack the undercurrents of tension prevalent elsewhere, fostering quicker bonds and more sustainable arrangements. This global perspective rhetorically underscores the portability of certain values while highlighting the localized nature of challenges, encouraging thoughtful consideration of what elements contribute to healthy societies. Long-term outlooks project scenarios where demographic shifts influence policy and culture, with potential emphasis on incentives for family building or community support systems designed to mitigate economic pressures without reinforcing dependency. Technological advancements may offer new avenues for connection, such as platforms that facilitate value aligned matching, reducing mismatches rooted in superficial expectations. Economic landscapes could stabilize through innovation in affordable housing and sustainable living models that align with minimalist preferences allowing broader access to security. The narrative pacing here builds anticipation for positive adaptations while acknowledging the time required for systemic change, emphasizing that individual actions today lay the groundwork for collective progress tomorrow. Psychological resilience across populations will play a key role as people navigate uncertainty, drawing on inner resources cultivated through adversity. Additional storytelling examples enrich the tapestry with the account of a group of friends who, having observed societal patterns, collectively adopt lifestyles of shared minimalism, supporting one another through practical advice and accountability without crossing into romantic or financial entanglements. Their bond exemplifies voluntary male camaraderie that provides emotional sustenance free from the complexities of mixed gender dynamics, illustrating alternative forms of fulfillment. On the other side, women forming professional networks focused on skill sharing and resource pooling demonstrate emerging strategies for mutual empowerment that address gaps left by withdrawn support systems. These group dynamics highlight creative responses to change, where innovation arises from necessity, fostering new models of interaction that may influence broader cultural norms over time. The rhetorical flow connects these micro level adaptations to macro level evolution, suggesting that grassroots efforts hold potential for meaningful impact. As the exploration of future possibilities unfolds, it becomes clear that the emphasis on self directed living among men has opened doors to pursuits previously sidelined by relational demands, including advanced hobbies, creative endeavors, and travel experiences that enrich personal narratives. Women similarly discover avenues for growth through entrepreneurial initiatives or career pivots that build on inherent strengths, though the path involves overcoming initial hurdles of resource allocation. Societal metrics, such as home ownership rates and savings behaviors, reflect these shifts, with men often achieving milestones earlier due to focused allocation and women adapting through strategic planning amid constraints. International models offer blueprints for integration where elements of tradition blend with modern needs, creating hybrid approaches that could inspire domestic innovation if openness to learning prevails. Psychological literature on resilience supports the observation that periods of disruption often precede periods of renewal for those who engage actively with the process. Media continues to evolve as a catalyst by hosting discussions that dissect economic data alongside personal testimonies, allowing viewers to synthesize information into coherent worldviews. Creators experiment with formats that combine analysis and narrative, drawing audiences into deeper engagement with the human stories behind statistics. This democratization of discourse empowers individuals to participate in shaping cultural narratives rather than passively consuming them, fostering a more informed populace capable of nuanced perspectives. The pacing of these developments suggests acceleration in awareness as more voices contribute to the conversation, leading to potential breakthroughs in understanding relational dynamics. Long term effects may include cultural reevaluation of success metrics, moving beyond material accumulation toward holistic well being that incorporates relational health when pursued voluntarily. Generational impacts extend to educational choices where young people select fields aligned with self sufficiency, such as trades, technology, and entrepreneurship, over paths that assume traditional support structures. This redirection influences innovation cycles as fresh talent enters sectors with practical mindsets geared toward problem solving amid uncertainty. Families witness these evolutions through conversations that bridge generational gaps, with elders offering cautionary insights and youth demonstrating adaptive strategies that honor past lessons while forging new paths. International contrasts become teaching moments for travelers and students who return with broadened perspectives, challenging assumptions, and inspiring incremental changes in local attitudes. The storytelling rhythm here maintains momentum by layering personal growth narratives atop societal observations, creating a comprehensive picture of transformation. In projecting further into the horizon, one envisions societies where balanced incentives encourage voluntary participation in family and community roles without coercion, allowing natural affinities to guide interactions. Economic policies may target root causes of affordability through innovation rather than redistribution, fostering environments where self reliance pairs effectively with mutual benefit. Psychological well being metrics could improve as individuals master boundary setting and value clarification, reducing instances of resentment and enhancing overall life satisfaction. Media platforms might mature into forums for constructive dialogue that bridge divides through evidence based exploration rather than polarization. These optimistic threads weave into the narrative without ignoring persistent challenges, emphasizing that progress stems from collective willingness to learn from history and adapt accordingly. The cumulative weight of these interconnected elements points toward a future where personal agency defines outcomes more than ever before, with men sustaining lifestyles of quiet prosperity and women pioneering resilient models of independence. International exchanges will likely increase as awareness grows of viable alternatives, prompting cultural cross pollination that enriches global perspectives. Generational cohorts will refine these approaches through trial and reflection, creating legacies defined by adaptability rather than rigidity. Societal structures will evolve in response to demographic realities, fostering innovation in living arrangements and support systems that match contemporary needs. Rhetorical closure approaches as the full arc of transformation comes into view from origins through current realities to projected horizons, equipping audiences with context for their own journeys. Shout out to the 1 Hour Gang. What did you think about what was discussed? Do you agree with the points raised? Leave a comment on the video sharing your thoughts. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.